I would also just, when you think about Loot, I think it's important to think about all the different projects that have emerged from that. You might call them derivatives. I think that that's doing a little bit of disservice because these projects, the term derivative is often, connected to lesser than, but these are not. Like the projects that are being created are much more grand in scope. They're building on top of Loot, or they have been inspired by Loot, or they have the original developers from Loot. But they're their own things, and they're eventually going to become something that's much bigger or greater than it. But at the same time, different, and you just can't it's hard to categorize those. Realms will eventually be its own ecosystem that has non-fantasy related games. It has probably some closed IP games, its own decentralized studio. But right now, 70% of the games are Loot projects. They're fantasy based. They have open IP. They're using blockchain, and part of the open IP is because it's running on open software, right? So the open intellectual property is largely because they're also open access, published coding and all those things as well, right? And that's really cool about crypto, is it's always been kind of embracing that aspect of an open internet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Medallion XLN podcast. Right now, I'm talking to OXS from the Herald of Loot NFT project.
Nice to meet you, Dwayne. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you as well. So, Herald of Loot, you guys are also part of the Lootverse, correct?
Yeah, we're sort of a structure that was inspired by the original Loot project with some of the original open IP ethos and free release and open content, and then some of the projects that spun out from Loot. So we do reporting. We're sort of a journalistic entity that discusses what's happening within Lootverse or Loot ecosystem related projects. And then we also do a little bit of original IP using the open intellectual property rights from Loot. And there's a group of us that work together, sort of decentralized in a decentralized format to try to accomplish those things.
Cool. So Herald of Loot, you guys do journalism for the Loot project. Why is that important? It's just an NFT project, right?
Yeah, it's important because the original Loot project had a lot of energy and a lot of really big thinkers in the space that started to imagine what an NFT project could be based off of the free release open IP from those original contracts, and then the idea of Loot NFTs serving as building blocks for other projects. And so during that original September, October, and November of 2021, a whole bunch of projects started to spin off and use the original Loot assets. And partly that's because of the attention. Don Hoffman was the creator of Loot, and he had a large following. The price of the project, the price of the assets ballooned. There was a Vitalik tweet that I think at one point the prices of the ETH-based price of Loot was something around 18 or 19 ETH per asset. And a lot of people started to imagine what that could build, and there was a lot of developers, there was a lot of engineers that were part of the project. But what they found out was that, it takes a lot of work to use a building block asset into something that is a game or is original IP or is a PFP project. And so as folks started to spin off their own ideas, attention was also split. And so one of the things we like to think about at the Herald is how to realign that attention, to try to think about how could the different projects work together, collaborate, be inspired by each other. And one of the projects that has spun out, that has maintained the original ethos, the openness, the decentralized manner in which it operates, a DAO structure, is the Realms project. So we applied for a grant through the Realms projects for a little bit of funding to talk about what was being built within that ecosystem. And so we were awarded a small grant to get started. And since around October or so, we've been tracking not only the general Lootverse, but a lot of a weekly content, a weekly newsletter on what's occurring within Realms. And then at the same time, we've been spinning out some of our own IP with creation of characters. There's an ongoing series we have by characters called Nibs and Knobs, which is kind of like a Calvin and Hobbes type, thing that you might see in a weekly or monthly periodical. And so we're partly writers. We came out from the Loot project as writers. I write in my personal life, professionally, not creatively, but that's kind of like our origin as non-engineers, trying to think about what Loot originally meant, what it could be, and then what are some of the projects that have embraced this original ethos.
Oh, very cool. So, Realms. Every time I talk to someone from the Loot project, they hold Realms in extreme high regard. Tell me, what makes Realms such a special project within the Lootverse?
Well, partly it's because they've stuck with the idea of Loot since the very beginning. So in that September of 2021, there was a project that was spin off, a derivative of Loot called the Realms project, but they used a MIT license for a random map generator. And someone used this to create 8,000 NFTs that were essentially maps, right? And one of the members, Loaf, he goes by on Twitter, wanted to create his own project using the idea of on-chain gaming, because Loot was originally thought of as kind of like this start of a fully on-chain game. And so he originally went over to him and a few of the other developers and Loot community members went over to the Arbitrum ecosystem with Magic Treasure DAO, which they're also an interesting project that spun out from Loot as well. And they just looked at the structure of Arbitrum and they realized that the throughput of the Arbitrum ecosystem using, both optimistic rollups in the compute using EVM, Ethereum virtual machine, was probably too slow and not effective enough to run fully on-chain games the way that they had imagined. So they started hunting around for other projects, and they ran into some of the folks from Starknet, and they came to the decision that Starknet was the best way to create a fully on-chain game with the ways that they wanted to, right? Using all the transactions, all the logic, all built on chain. And so, because there were so many original Loot members that not only did they go to Arbitrum, they stuck with the original people who were part of that ecosystem. They spent years building what they imagined, this game eventually that will come out probably in Q3 of this year called Eternum. But this is 2.5 years of development that most Web3 games have had. They're rushed, right? They're pushed out because of attention, and they're, by the seat of their pants trying to generate enough things for people to do to keep attention there. But they have always, in many ways, not played that game. They've always built things from a intentional standpoint with values that they believed in value first. And I think that gets a lot of respect within the community of what they're doing. And so, now they have 15 games in development, developers from all over the world. They're run by a DAO. There's no leader of Realms. They're all things that I would say Loot, the original ecosystem of Loot, would have embraced.
Cool. And where's Dom Hoffman in all this? Is he still an active participant, or is he like Satoshi, where he just released it to the world and sees and is just observing what's happening?
He started participating. He was originally participating. He has since they received a big funding round. His company is SUP. If you're not familiar, I would check them out. But he originally had a project called Blitmap with many of the same ideas. He was also part of the Nouns community, which is also based off of open IP and expansive rights for developers to do what you want with those things. And so he's still very much doing his own projects. I would say he's a little bit less attached to Web3 currently, but he's also working on a social app. He's working on his own gaming ecosystem within SUP. He's still working on those things. He's not really very active in the Loot community. I imagine someday he might return. But that is part of the blessing and the curse of Loot, is that when it was created, because it had so much attention and because all that attention was financialized through crypto, he released something for free with no expectations that he would run it, right? And he had thousands of people who invested thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then expected him to do something with it. And that was never the intention. So, I have a lot of sympathy for that original project. I think he does return at some point with some ideas. But yeah, he's not currently working with the Loot ecosystem.
Well, that's the great thing about Loot. Even it like I said this in my last podcast with the banners guys, is Loot is great because it's so decentralized. Especially, and it gives me parallels with Satoshi and how he released Bitcoin. He released Bitcoin and introduced it to the community, and then the community just took it and ran with it. And eventually, Satoshi was able to disappear into the background, and now Bitcoin runs by itself. No one has to, tell the community what to do. The community plays a role in making sure that Bitcoin is steady in its progress and growth from all angles, financially, technology-wise. And it seems like that's the same thing that's happening with Loot. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, we'll see. There's definitely some people who are still very much part of Loot. I would also just, when you think about Loot, I think it's important to think about all the different projects that have emerged from that. You might call them derivatives. I think that's doing a little bit of disservice, because these projects, the term derivative is often, connected to lesser than, but these are not. The projects that are being created are much more grand in scope. They're building on top of Loot, or they have been inspired by Loot, or they have the original developers from Loot. But they're their own things, and they're eventually going to become something that's much bigger or greater than it. But at the same time, different, and you just can't it's hard to categorize those. Realms will eventually be its own ecosystem that has non-fantasy related games. It has probably some closed IP games, its own decentralized studio. But right now, 70% of the games are Loot projects. They're fantasy based. They have open IP. They're using blockchain, and part of the open IP is because it's running on open software, right? So the open intellectual property is largely because they're also open access, published coding and all those things as well, right? And that's really cool about crypto, is it's always been kind of embracing that aspect of an open internet.
Yeah, that's super important. And because it's open IP, it just invites others to collaborate on top of whatever is existing, which kind of fuels the growth, because more people are collaborating, more people are bringing other people in, and they're contributing their own unique ideas. And, I just love that about the Loot project, how it's able to kind of grow on its own without a central figure.
Yeah, I mean, it can't, and it needs to have influential people that are part of it. Luckily, it has folks within Realms. It had the original Arbitrum Treasure DAO project. It has there's a person on Twitter you may be familiar with, Tim Shell, who is kind of pushed some of the more IP related stuff with the Open Quill project, which is a writing project using Loot as a kind of original thinking piece on what you would expand on that. So yeah, it needs to have folks who are contributing. Loot by itself, it'll die unless there's people that are actively engaging with it. And luckily, fortunately, we have folks who are still engaging with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this was a big week for Starknet, because they released their token finally. And from my perspective, I only learned about Starknet through just doing these interviews with various Loot members. on the first episode of second episode of this podcast, I was talking with Banners, and he introduced me to StarkNet, and that was like my first time hearing about StarkNet about 2 years ago. And now they release, and they're kind of like the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah, StarkNet has also been building since 2016. They've been developed, I think, don't quote me on that one, but they've been working on their project for a long time. They had to create everything from scratch because they don't use the EVM Solidity as their language. A lot of the creation is, had to have been from the ground up with Cairo, which it's good and bad, right? Because it's not easily portable. You can't port ETH project necessarily right to StarkNet. You have to have you have to be versed in writing language, and so you have to start kind of at the beginning from scratch. They've started to develop tools on using Cairo in a way that makes it a little bit less intensive. So I think there's a lot of growth in the future, and they're trying to attract developers. The first airdrop or provisions that they released was primarily to attract folks from ETH to come over, because there's a lot of people that were just they're not familiar, they're not working with StarkNet. They need to have people that are within the system that can use the coding, that are going to be building before the users can be there. There has to be things that are built on StarkNet for users to come over and not just farm airdrops. So, there's some problems they had with the airdrop, but I also think that I get where they're coming from. They have to get those folks. They have to attract and align themselves with ETH if they want to be part of the ecosystem. And I think that there was probably some miscalculations on the reactions, but there's also, they've done a lot of really awesome things as well, and I'm pretty excited about the future.
I was on mute. So as far as StarkNet is concerned, how do you think it's positioned with the other L2s? What is this differentiating factor?
You have to view non-EVM alignment as being good. That Cairo allows better compute power. One of the things that we know is that quantum computing eventually will be really, really important for the future. And unless we have tools that can protect things like your seed phrase, there's going to be a lot of danger in crypto in the 10, 15 years. And StarkNet has a leg up on protecting against quantum computing. So that's one of those things. It also will, because it uses Starks, it's going to be able to transact off chain and then use proofs to confirm on chain. That's going to allow some things in gaming specifically that are going to be really useful. Things like fog of war, things like hiding transactions so people can have some mystery in games. That's really interesting and I think going to be high potential. Also, because it's a ZK rollup, it's going to allow for, once there's a big user base, it's going to allow for lower transaction costs. I don't know when it's going to rival things like Solana or if it ever will, but it'll be faster than a lot of the optimistic rollups that are being used by current L2s. And so in the short term, I think the non-EVM alignment is going to hurt them. But in the long term, if it gets enough traction, it's going to be a major benefit.
And speaking of gaming, as a millennial, I grew up playing all these video games like Super Mario, where I'm collecting these coins. And part of my dream has always been, man, I have so many coins. I wish there was a way for me to withdraw these coins and use it to buy some candy or something, like when I was little. And now we're getting to this point where we have the ability to actually create currency that can be used in games. How do you see that driving the development of the overall technology and blockchain and technology overall?
I think a mix on this, as I also gained throughout my life, is I do think that heavy financialization of games it's a double-edged sword. I do think that it shouldn't be just the folks who build the games that are rewarded for its content. And I also don't think that models like Roblox that have some people who are making money off of their content, but the majority of individuals see nothing from that is the ideal future. So one of the things I do like about the potential of crypto is it can blur the lines between consumer and creator better to align incentives. But we just have to get there with fun games, with not this absurd speculation on like what these coins are going to be. And to get rid of all of the investors that are part of these games, right? So mostly it's folks who are not playing, they're not playing games that are buying these coins up. And that is driving up the price. And it's probably good in some ways. It increases what they might be worth currently, but it's going to also ruin a lot of ecosystems because normal gamers will never play games if they can't, if there's not like a free access point. So maybe there's a way, because most of the people who play games, there's like 10% of people who actually pay, right? And 90% of people play for free on these like premium games. And so maybe there's a potential of doing that. But because of gas costs, until we can drive down gas enough that ecosystems can compensate, I just don't know if those types of people are going to be attracted to gaming. And that's okay. Maybe it's just a niche market. But I do think that in the future, StarkNet, which is really interesting, they're going to pay for gas costs with the Stark token. So if they can somehow reward users of StarkNet with Stark tokens and then have it so they can use those Stark tokens to play games, right, essentially for free, I don't see why that couldn't be a really attractive model.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. So I guess a good follow-up to that would be that, like, how would or why would someone play video games, or why wouldn't someone play video games? Oh, sorry. I had my question and then just whoop, and then it came back. All right. So the question was, like how people monetize or how game publishers monetize their games is that everything is free to play. So they make sure that buying like stuff doesn't affect your gameplay. So it doesn't give you more powerful weapons or give you more powerful armor. It just you just buy the aesthetics of a gun and can customize it in a nice way. That gives you like this cool customization. So wouldn't that be a good way for, crypto to be integrated into gaming without like affecting the gameplay? Because you're not buying superpowers. You're buying just the ability to customize like different outfits and weapons and stuff like that. So shouldn't we borrow that concept and bring it into crypto? I'm sure it's not as heavy on the transaction ledger as it would be if like you're just monetizing every kill or something like that.
Yeah, so I would consider that more of a Web 2.5 game. So there's games that are being built that are mostly you would consider Web 2 games, and then you can purchase cosmetics that you can use for social signaling. And that's really cool. That's a really good integration of blockchain technology, and you can then sell those on the open market. And that's a good way to go. I think there's another genre of games that's being created though, where all of the game logic, all of the moves are going to require gas and they're going to require transactions. And the benefits of that is it allows a very credible, neutral, trustless system that I think the future of competitive games could be on-chain, that run on this autonomous system that if the server goes down, if the team goes away, that the game continues to run no matter what. And that's a really attractive feature of fully on-chain games that require more than just like, there could be a cosmetic system that's created, but they're also going to require other types of financial transaction costs that in the future we have to figure out how to do that, because free players are not going to play when all other moves cost money.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying though. Like it doesn't make sense to kind of do that. Like I don't see what the benefit of that is. Instead, we could just charge, instead of like charging for every single move, we could just charge just for the ability to customize items and stuff like that, because that's a lot cheaper. It appeals more. And, you know, you have the option on whether to pay or not, which probably appeals to a wider audience. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the Web 2.5 games. Those are being built and those are awesome. But the ones that like StarkNet is building they're fully on-chain games. The logic's on-chain. And the benefits of those is that there is no team, there is no server that needs to be compensated. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense for a genre of games that will exist. But as costs go down, it might be that a separate category of new types of games are created that are all fully on-chain, which means they're much more heavily reliant on compute power, on transaction power. Both are going to be successful. Both are going to work. But the one is not that much different. The first one is not that much different from what we currently have. Just allowing people to sell cosmetics without having ownership of, from Blizzard or something like that. That's not that much different from what we have currently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both are going to be great, though. I totally think that there's space for both of those types of systems.
Well, I think the core of the question I'm trying to answer is, why does a game have to be on-chain? What's the selling point? Because I don't see a selling point right now for why a game has to be completely on-chain. Like, does it improve it in some way? Does it... I know earlier you mentioned that, like, after developers stop working on it, this game will be fully supported. Does every aspect of the game have to be fully on-chain in order for that reality to come to fruition?
Not ever. So there's a couple benefits, and I'm still actually working through this thesis as well. But so the game logic, because it's all on-chain, because many of the assets are on-chain, because the infrastructure for a lot of these projects is quite, basic. It's kind of like things that we might have seen back in the 90s when you were gaming. You can spin up new instances in like a matter of days. So currently, right now with Loot Survivor, I would recommend just checking that out to see what that feels like. There's already been 6 instances that are created by different developers that they use the original code, all because it's on blockchain, to create their own game. So if one goes down, another can be created, and there could be a slight alteration in the rules. It could be a different cosmetic design of how you see the game. And those are things that you couldn't do with one of these, a game that was created by a centralized team. If the centralized team goes down or they change things, your asset is only worth something if somebody else decides to integrate it in a way that makes sense, right? So you could have a game, a sword or something from World of Warcraft, but it doesn't mean anything if the game servers go down unless somebody else builds a game and integrates that into theirs, right? And so then they have to create... You're reliant on many centralized parties to do that. So one of the things that on-chain games does is it makes that bar really, really low. It's ready to be ported into new games already, right off the bat, kind of like the original Loot project. And then there's no server. The team that created the game they're not paying any kind of like server amount, right, per month or per year to host the games. It's all built into the blockchain. The hosting of the games, all those things are already built within the blockchain. It's already financialized. It's already equipped to handle, the very heavily financial strain of what crypto games can be. They're not super developed right now. They're not like high fidelity types of games. You're not playing Call of Duty yet. So we need to figure out like more effective ways to transact with large amounts of data in a very fast manner. But we're heading that direction, right? If you were to imagine what AI videos would look like 2 years ago compared to what we have today, you can start to get a sense of like where we could be in the future.
All right, that's very interesting because it sounds like kind of the free freeware games that were popular back in the 90s, like Doom, Duke Nukem, Rise of Triad, and the rest of them. It kind of sounds like that because you could just pretty much put those games on like a floppy disk and then transfer it to like your friend and stuff like that. And so that's interesting. So it kind of sounds.
But not only that, like those high scores that could all be embedded into the system, right? So like if there was Doom that you could play anywhere and port it into any kind of device where there was like a leaderboard and there was like things that you could collect, that's what we're thinking about with this new fully on-chain games. It's not just that you can port it. It's that all of the information from the games is put on chain, right? That can be easily retrieved from anywhere else in the world and put into, into leaderboards, into databases that you all have, that everyone already has access to.
And I know StarkNet is built by the same people who came up with zero knowledge proofs. So I'm sure they have a lot of protection for privacy, and because we're going into this world. And in my last podcast with Robert Scoble, who's a famous tech author, he was pretty adamant that we don't need privacy anymore. And I pushed back to the best of my ability, but he's like a really smart guy. But anyway, the point of that question is that we're going into this world where privacy is going to be eroded more and more. And it seems like this, even if we don't apply it in a gaming aspect, as far as this type of blockchain technology, it can be applied to different other apps which can support, preserve our privacy, as well as execute and do whatever actions it needs to do as an app. So do you think that's the type of product that Loot is building? Like, even removing the gaming aspect, just the ability to build an app that does various actions that can be ported from person to person, and also maintain kind of our digital sovereignty.
Well, there's not. I would consider Loot. Loot is the base assets that were created that maybe kicked off a lot of these teams to do things that you're talking about. But no, I wouldn't say that Loot is doing that. Some folks within the Loot community are embracing some of the ethos of decentralization, of privacy, and that's awesome. Some are not, though. That's the beauty and problem of Loot, is that you can do whatever you want with it. And then, it's really interesting to talk about privacy. Blockchain is also doesn't provide very much privacy in some respects because everything is on chain. I do think that ZK rollups are going to allow some higher degrees of privacy in the future. And, what the Stark, where people originally did was create Starks that have to do with the type of computation that will be necessary for a future that maybe does have some of these privacy mechanisms built in. And that's exciting. I think that there's a lot of folks you could be interviewing in the future on privacy concerns related to crypto and the type of encryption methods that are used that are from the StarkNet team, that are from other communities that are building other types of models as well. And so I think that is something that's in the future is really important. But privacy right now, you can track folks' wallets, right, better than you could ever have tracked financial trails in modern finance, right? It's much more transparent. And so in some ways, we have less privacy than we ever had with crypto.
Yeah, but you have to know what the wallet is.
Sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
The OX hash that you have to figure out. It's not like the wallet name is the name of you, right? It's not like this is, Dwayne's wallet who lives here at this address. You have to figure out what my wallet is, and then you can track it. So I think that kind of abstraction gives you a little bit of safety, a layer of safety, and of course there's more layers of safety that you can add on. For example, having multiple wallets on different blockchains. But that's But also, how do you feel about, this new era that we're going into with just the current pace of technology as far as artificial intelligence, extended reality, and a few other cool technologies that are starting to go mainstream?
Well, that's a big topic. I mean, I am. I think I have two sides. I think that there's a lot of potential challenges for people who are creatives, right? So, I'm using Loot as a backdrop. I'm working on a graphic novel. We do content creation. We use AI tools in the creation of content at some level. We also have original content. And it is scary as a creative that was your skill set, and it's daunting, right? To have these things that are out there that can reproduce some of the things that only you could have done. And so I feel for that community. I'm also, it also allows folks who maybe never had access to those types of skills to now have access. So it also equalizes people. So at the same time, it equalizes folks who didn't, maybe you're working a job in a new country and you don't speak the language as well. You can use now AI tools to converse with customers, and you can create graphics for your small business that help you kind of keep that edge against people and compete against larger institutions. And so it has both of those things available right now. And that's without any of the esoteric kind of like, I don't know, is AI going to come and destroy us all? Like, I'm not even thinking about that right now, because that's something that, for the time being, it's not something that's in our everyday life. And I'm just thinking about the practical implications currently, without getting too much doomer talk about like what it could be in the future. You know what I mean? So I'm in both camps. I use it. It makes me more effective at the things that I do. But I completely understand why people are wary and worried about what it could mean in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I use it too. It's great for validating your ideas, as well as kind of cleaning up where you can mess up from time to time. And I do see a lot of flaws, though. For example, I use image generators to create like short movies, and it's really hard to get the exact pose that you want in order to communicate the exact feeling that you want. Because it's like, at the end of the day, these things are statistically predicting what you want to generate. So, it could be within the margin of error, and sometimes it could be like widely outside anything that you ask for. So I feel like in the future, we just need to in the future, the people who are creating these things need to give us more options in how we're able to fine tune the output. And then it'll be like at a good place where we can all create exactly what we want. How do you feel about that?
Well, we're only at the beginning of this, right? So we're going to see exponential improvements on all of these devices, right? So your text to generation models are only going to get better from here. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know if they're going to give us more options. Looking at the history is that we tend to be more affected by consensus, by the larger group's thoughts. And I think because of the way that these AI devices are generated based off of past outputs, is that I don't know if it makes us more creative. I think what I've noticed anecdotally is with my own writing, what folks are going to do is they're going to become more reliant on what they're generating to alleviate their own work burden. And so I don't know if it's going to differentiate people. I think it's going to make us more and more like each other. So that's not the best, but there's going to be other types of, like, if you think about like cable, maybe there's other ways that folks can develop AI tools in the competition. There's tons of companies that are working on AI tools. And so we're going to have a lot of different options and be able to choose the one that we think, the types of models that were used to create something that we more attach ourselves to. And I think that that's good for consumers. But but it's complicated. It's more complicated than just saying that that it's going to be good or bad. It's going to have both. It's going to have negative consequences. It's going to have positive consequences, and we're just going to have to like be ready for it because it's coming whether we want to or not.
Okay. And I'm curious on your reaction to OpenAI releasing their Sora model, which looks pretty good, like from what I've seen, and they're able to generate video up to a minute long of just whatever scenario that you can imagine. How do you feel about that?
I haven't got access to it yet. I've also only seen the videos that are generated. As a person who's not in the industry of producing film, I'm excited, right? I'm excited that I can now maybe have the ability to craft my own videos. So at a personal level, I'm excited about what it could be. I think that folks who have those skills to generate videos, to do, they work in Hollywood or whatever like that, that was their edge. And I think that they see this as a declining edge. And I do, I can sympathize with like what they're going to run into in the future. But at a personal level, yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to increase the ability for people to do marketing. It's going to increase the ability for people to do creative works that don't necessarily have those skills, but it's going to create less differentiation between folks who have their own ability that used to separate them to folks who didn't. And that's both good and bad at the same time.
Very interesting. And now, just to create a bridge between AI and blockchain, Sam Altman, he has his own blockchain project called WorldCoin, which I'm not too super sure about what it is. I just remember seeing videos about people looking into an orb, and my first thought was, if this is not the most dystopian thing I've ever seen in my entire life, I don't know what it is. So Are you familiar with WorldCoin at all? And do you have any opinions about it?
Not enough. I honestly don't know enough about the project. I know that his philosophy is that we're going to have a way to identify ourselves as human and not as non-human in the future. And so we're going to have to use some kind of like information that is unique only to us to do that. And, maybe that's true. I'm just not sure. It does feel pretty dystopian. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be rushing out to have them scan my eye so I can get some crypto coins. But in the future, I do think that there's probably a need for human beings to let other human beings know that they are real.
Yeah, definitely. Because text to image generation is getting super ridiculous. I just did a newsletter video where I used text to image to create like an Asian woman, and she's pretty realistic. Like I feel like you would have to like really be in the text to image space in order to realize that she's not. Like you have to like look at it like a few more times. It's really approaching that uncanny valley. Probably next few iterations, you won't be able to tell the difference between what's real and what's not.
Yeah, I think everybody should spend some time try to create imperfections with AI generation. I do think that the models right now are trained on these ideal types, which is problematic. Like we've seen problems related to like race with very like what am I trying to say? Very stereotypical representations of people because they use past information to build these models. And that's problematic. If you want a more organic photography, right, you're going to have a way to produce things that are not the ideal types too. And I don't think they do a very good job of doing that because of the way that they're trained. So everybody should just spend some time trying to create like non-stereotypical images that don't fit within the trained data to see the limitations currently. In the future, they'll probably clear that up, but currently there's major problems with that.
Yeah, I think one of the most glaring problems with text-to-image generation is that whenever the model is doing something with their hands, like it cannot figure out the fingers. It does not understand fingers or digits or anything. It'll like have like 17 different hands or whatever, doing all types of different movements that's not normal. And then you could be like, no matter how realistic it is, you could point it out and be like, that's AI generated because no one has that many fingers. So I think there's like a few different imperfection things that you're talking about. But also there's ways to kind of like prompt around it. There's like one of my tells that no matter how realistic the photo looks, that something is AI generated is a skin. Like AI has this way of doing like studio lights with every single thing, but if you prompt it to say advanced skin texture and matte lighting, then it looks a lot more realistic and it looks like it looks like something that you can see out in the wild, like in the world and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just gonna get better too. Midjourney's on their 6th version right now, and DALL-E is, better in some circumstances and worse in some circumstances, but they're all going to be very good in the future. They're only going to get better.
Yeah. And I think
hand issue, that's not going to be a problem in the future.
Let's hope so. Because even artists have a difficult time drawing hands.
Sure.
Yeah, so hands seem to be a thing. But I think as far as the different image generators, my favorite is Stable Diffusion because it's so open. And although it takes a lot more on the prompting side in order to get like a quality output, I think it's better than probably Midjourney and OpenAI and the rest of them because it's open and it gives you the ability to customize your outputs by adding low rank adaptations, which are called LoRa's, and then you can also have these derivative checkpoints that are trained on certain styles. So it gives you this ability to customize your output and get like this consistent output every single time you generate, as opposed to like Midjourney, which will give you like, if you generate 4 images, it'll give you 4 different styles, unless you specify, unless you super specify, I want this type of style. But even then, it gives you that style, but variations of. So that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, for high-end users, Stable Diffusion is probably the best. Midjourney is better for out-of-the-box folks. I think the general audience, Midjourney is much better because they don't need those checkpoints. They don't need the different, ways to do smaller iterations on their images. And so it just depends on who's using. If it's you, I'm sure Stable Diffusion is much better. But for the common user in the future, it probably will be one of these more less modifiable projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the same thing with different technologies. So let's go back to Loot. Man, we're so off topic. Well, not really off topic. It's related, but let's go back to Loot. So what's your view on the ethos behind Loot?
Yeah, I think it's built out of decentralization, permissionlessness, and these ideas of building blocks, that you start with these building block elements to make games, stories, images, content easily usable. Kind of like in that old metaverse kind of idea, is that then they can be used for other types of projects, other types of games. So an infinitely expansive universe. It doesn't have to be fantasy based. It doesn't have to be, medieval times, or whatever. But that to me is like the root core aspect because of how Loot was created. There was no fees that were taken. Dom Hoffman made no money off of it. In fact, he probably lost money because of the contract costs at the time. Then anybody could have used it for anything that they wanted to, and many did. There was hundreds of projects that were created, mostly to try to extract resources from other people, but there was some original good ideas that were created. And so that to me is what Loot is. It's just this idea that other people can build off of if they want to, that has no restrictions, that you have permission to do what you want with it. And that's really cool. I think that's a really novel idea of someone who built something with no expectation of financial reward.
Nice. Now, what are like the top So Realms is one of them. Well, what are some of the other top projects associated with the brand?
I would just probably, if you have folks who listen, to check out Hyperloot. Hyperloot is a developer that's making I believe they haven't released very much, but it's going to be probably a mobile game using CC0 projects. So that's like there's a project called the 1337, right? The Skulls project using loot aspect, using chain runners, that original project that was CC0, and they're building like a battler like game that'll be on your mobile with the experienced team. They have really high level graphics. So Hyperloop, they haven't released very much, but that's worth checking out. There's a project by Devin Dolan, who is a novella series. They have professional writers who are using loot as inspiration to write these short stories that are going to be turned into written works, short novels that then, maybe they are used for films or for animation or something like that. Our own project, I'm working on a graphic novel that's inspired by some of the loot ideas and writings. And then the big one is, of course, Realms. There's also just so you know, there's dozens of other projects that also use loot. But I would call them like solo projects that they have a low chance of really taking off to the mainstream, but they're still doing stuff and working on things. And so the Realms project is probably the most heavily funded project. It's completely decentralized. It's through a DAO, funded by a DAO. They have their own cryptocurrency called Lords. They're developing fully on-chain gaming on Starknet. And so that's why we mention them most, because they have the most backing. They're most likely to be successful in the future.
Cool. And tell me more about your graphic novel that they developed.
Sure, yeah. It's also partly funded by Realms, and it's going to be this person named Tim Shell and Loot Hero, and some of the early contributors to the Loot ecosystem wrote out some kind of building block lore material that people could use if they want to integrate it into their own games. And so I used that to draft a script. We have a professional artist and team. We're working with another kind of Web3 initiative called Macroverse to help build out the comic series. Right now it's planned to be a graphic novel that will be available in hard copy, right? You can go and buy it. And that's kind of to bring some of the loot stuff to the masses. So there's a fun storyline. Right now we have a bunch of games that are in development, but no real characters. And so part of the idea, Blowbird, I guess, is a good example of how characters are really, really important to an ecosystem, is that original IP can help people feel more attached to a project. And so that's sort of my goal, is to create kind of a compelling storyline that uses ideas from loot so people can kind of know it outside of this really vague, abstract permissionlessness, crypto, blockchain idea.
And you mentioned Blowbird. I've been hearing a lot about it. What makes Blowbird so special?
Mostly just because he's the first. He's just a meme that was created within Realms. That's funny. People originally, the idea within Realms was to create PFPs that were AI generations, because they were going to, for their Eternum game, when you created a new gaming instance, you want to play the game, you have to create an avatar. And then so you would describe yourself and it would spit out kind of a AI image of who you were. And so to train your own model, they had community members contribute images using Midjourney or using Dolly or using Stable Diffusion or whatever. And one of the outputs that was produced was this weird looking blobfish character. And it was really funny to some of the members. And it just became a meme within the community. This this character that didn't really feel like an adventurer, that was, just kind of weird looking. And someone turned him into a chatbot within the Discord. And so you can go into Discord and ask a question to Blowbird, and he would give you this snarky answer. And so over the last year, he became kind of a recurring character. And one of the members of the community just turned him into a PFP collection. And so it's one of the first PFP collections on Starknet.
Oh, cool. So it has an NFT collection. How did it do? It released this week or something, right?
Yeah, it did well. It minted out. 4,844 tokens were minted. It's sitting at a floor price, 100 lords. That would be like $35, US dollars, that people could have minted. They're trading now at 0.05 ETH on Starknet. So they've, I don't know, quadrupled in price. Who knows where they'll end up? It's not an indicator whether it's good, but yeah, it's been successful. It minted out. It is popular. It's trending. Starknet community members that are not affiliated with Realms have been using it for PFPs. So it does also show like a little bit of like communal spirit within Starknet. The different projects that are building stuff have, really showed their support to Realms and embraced it as kind of a Starknet PFP.
Oh, nice. So this Bluebird NFT, is it representative of bigger and better things coming down the pipeline?
I would not consider it as an indicator of anything within Realms. It's a project that was, like PFPs, it's a meme. And I think you could track the price of Bluebird and probably get a sense of how the ecosystem is doing. But in the future, because it's the first, it's hard to say. There's going to be other projects that release other PFPs, and they will also trend and will move attention away. It's not affiliated with the original team. It's not really affiliated with Realms. So I just want to be, careful in saying anything about how it represents Realms. It's cool. I like it. I have some of them. That's what I would leave it at.
Nice. So speaking of PFPs, I think something that kicked off the second NFT blow up trend was the cyberpunks,
Cyberbrokers?
No, the punks, the NFT
projects.
Yeah, CryptoPunks. There you go. So CryptoPunks came out and they completely took over the news space, and then Bored Ape Yacht Club came out a little bit after, and they completely blew up. Justin Bieber has a Bored Ape, Snoop Dogg has a Bored Ape, Eminem has a Bored Ape. All these people, these famous people had these Bored Apes, and at the time it was like the biggest project in the world. Like, I knew people who had Bored Apes and they were super obnoxious, hated them completely. But like at the same time, it seemed like Bored Ape and the CryptoPunks, they were pushing the NFT narrative to a mainstream audience, and it just dissipated. Just the bubble popped, and then no one cared anymore. Like, what's your take on that? Do you think there was an opportunity missed with these Bored Apes and CryptoPunks?
Well, I don't consider them failures, to be honest. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars. Bored Ape was able to acquire CryptoPunks and Yuga Labs, and they were able to acquire a bunch of other studios. And if Web3 is successful, they have a significant treasury that they can build what they want. I don't know if they necessarily knew what they wanted to do before it took off. I do believe that PFPs are a little bit about the biggest fool theory, that you just have to find their only worth is what other people will pay for them at some level. They're just social signaling at many levels. And then the Bored Ape owners made hundreds of thousands of dollars also with the ApeCoin launch, right? So I don't consider that to be a failure. Is it sustainable? No, I think that it was a bubble and it has burst. It was probably never worth that much. CryptoPunks are still, though, they're still trading at very similar levels to what they did 2 years ago during the bull run. I mean, it's lower, but that's more of an indicator of the general market trend. The whole market popped, right? It wasn't just Bored Apes. And so, yeah, I think that they did really, really well. They are able to capture attention. That's 90% of what the crypto space is right now, unfortunately, is just capturing attention. They were very effective at it. So, yeah, that's my personal belief. I don't know if what they build is going to be sustainable for the long point, but they have more resources than anybody else.
Yeah, actually, just now I checked to see where the ApeCoin is trading at, and it's still on the front page of market cap trading at like position number 3 at the time. So I guess you were right. There's still a strong community behind it.
I don't know if it necessarily means a strong community, but it does mean that it's heavily traded.
What's your differentiation? Like why? Because to me, if it's strongly being traded, that means that there's a strong community. Like, what's your differentiation?
I think if people are like still, none of the IP is worth anything right now for the Bored Ape stuff. Like there was a lot of stuff during the hype cycle. And so, yeah, people are using, there's a lot of speculation that ApeCoin will be used for Magic Eden because Bored Ape has a partnership with Magic Eden to produce a marketplace, right? So I think that most of the market are people trying to predict what people will buy at. And to me, that doesn't mean community. If you're buying something because you believe that someone else is going to buy it at a higher price, that to me doesn't mean that you are part of that community. You're just a speculator on where you think the price is going to be to somebody else. A community to me is someone who's participating, they're voting, they're discussing, and they're talking about how to make the projects better, they're fans. Like that to me is what a community member is.
Okay. That's a pretty good differentiation definition. Okay. So moving forward with these crypto projects or NFT projects in particular, a community first focus is probably like the best indicator of success. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, as part of Loot, I think organic growth is the best long-term strategy for a project. Healthy long-term growth.
Yeah. Healthy long-term growth. Because, man, like, so I believe that the speculators, they definitely play a role in crypto, but I also feel like they are kind of destroying it as well. They're kind of destroying it as well because they're not contributing outside of just making the number go up. And I wonder, like, because they're definitely a part of it, but there's other balancing forces, such as the miners, such as the community members that kind of balance the weight of crypto. And I wonder if sometimes the speculators, they probably have too much power to determine the trajectory of crypto as opposed to the other links in the chain.
I think eventually this solves itself. Right now, because most of the space is speculators, that's okay. I think speculation is it creates excitement. The stock market is a lot of speculators that are buying projects, but there's also like users. There's also people that are they're participating in different ways. And right now, there's just not very many people outside of that speculation kind of element that are here. There's developers, there's speculators and traders, and that's part of it. But we also need to have fans. We need to have participants. We need to have users. We need to have other use cases for crypto assets and platforms. And so I think we get there. We just aren't currently there yet. Those are just bubbles. The bubble pop up, they'll bubble up, and then it'll pop, and it'll bubble up, and it'll pop, and it'll bubble up, and it'll pop. And that's going to make a lot of people angry, right? Because there's going to be a lot of retail people that buy during the bubble, and then it's going to pop, and they're going to lose a lot of money, and then they're not going to participate again.
Yeah. And speaking of speculators, Bitcoin is approaching its all-time high again. I think its last all-time high was like 63,000. So right now it's at 51 after being at a low of
69,000 for what mean number?
Oh, that's where it was? Was that 60?
Yeah.
69?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. The person who sold off at the top right there, he probably made bank because then it dropped down to like 21%. Yeah. So there seems to be a lot of hype around crypto now, but not really. It seems like that the hype is exclusively in the realm of price movement. it doesn't seem like that's transferring to like other projects. What do you think?
Yeah, I saw a Twitter message, a tweet that someone had the other day. I don't think the retail is in it right now. I think it's the same folks who entered the last cycle are just still in here. And so I think that either it's coming or they're not. There's a lot of people that are really burned by the last cycle that didn't necessarily know what they were doing, that put too much money in, that used leverage and got wrecked. And I do hope that they come back and the growth is slower and folks have a chance to kind of like find its peaks and valleys and can participate at a richer level. I just don't know. I don't know if it's just gonna, especially for NFTs, I do think that there needs to be like legitimate users and not just people who are buying into ETFs that are part of the projects. It's good for prices of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but for NFT projects that are built that the smart contracts mean something, it's not necessarily good. So we need to have both kind of users. And so far we haven't seen it. It's just people returning into that had left during the bear market. And so maybe that's coming. I just don't know. I wish I did. I don't.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was a lot of people who just, even just a few weeks ago with the ETFs, Bitcoin approval, there's a lot of people who got burnt just in that, because there was a time where I guess someone hacked the Twitter account of the SEC, and the SEC said they're not going to approve it based on the hack. And then the price of Bitcoin just jumped. And then I saw a bunch of tweets saying, "Oh, I lost my life savings." And I'm like, but it was false news though. So then they sold, and then the SEC came out and said that was a fake tweet, and the price went back up. And I felt so bad for them. I'm like, yo, why can't y'all just be a little bit more patient? What do you think about that?
Well, if those people had bought back in a week later, they would have been making money. So I don't feel too bad. Yeah, it's not great when the SEC can't keep security on their social accounts. That's true for everybody. I think that when they condemn folks for fraud, they should also just be sure that they're not doing things that also endanger retail. But yeah, those things are going to happen. Like there's always going to be these major spikes. There's a lot of people who, maybe part of that original wave of GameStop wave that made a lot of money off of GameStop that are like kind of pushing the space. And a lot of it is gambling. A lot of people are gambling. It's world market, like a world casino. I think that that's hard for people to understand if you're developing stuff, like to know that it's both a legitimate project. It's maybe like art, it's social signaling, but it's also gambling. And all those things are kind of merged together in crypto.
Yeah, crypto is fun. Still fun. Even if you lost all your money, it's still fun.
Maybe for some. It depends how much money you lost, I think.
Yeah. Well, I got scammed in around like the little, what are they called? The Bay Area Yacht Club, the Bored Ape Yacht Club era. I got scammed out like a ton of money. And it was because I just didn't understand the technology. I just didn't understand what actually was happening there. And I didn't understand like how I could do it myself. So I was trusting like who I thought was a broker to invest in it for me, but they were just milking me dry. Then like once I caught on, I already lost a ton of money. I was, oh man, that's dumb. That's pretty dumb.
There's a lot of those things. It's really easy to, when a transaction is a second, it's a click. It's really easy to get, you have to be really careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So OXS, it's been fun talking to you. It's been fun having this very insightful conversation on the NFT market. Do you have anything to promote? Are you on mute? I can't hear you.
Hey, you there, Dwayne?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh, I said it's been fun talking to you. And do you have anything to promote as far as your project is concerned, Herald of Loot?
Well, I would just, if folks tune in and track what you're up to, we have a newsletter that goes out weekly. We also release special issues that might be related to technology, that might be related to StarkNet, it might be an interview with a founder we find interesting, it might be a loot-related project. So track the Herald of Loot Twitter account. We're also active. My personal account, O_access, is active on Warpcaster. We're active on personal account for Twitter. Check out Realms, see what they're building. You can play for free the Loot Survivor game, just to see what fully on-chain games might look like, or at least at the beginning. You can find more details on their Discord, which you can also reach through their Twitter account just to see what people are up to. Yeah, that's kind of about it for now, at least.
Well, all right. And yeah, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Medallion XLN podcast. See you around.